Have you ever stopped to think about the hidden journey of the stuff you buy? I mean, beyond the factory or the store shelf, there's this massive, complex network, the supply chain. Today, we're going to unpack the huge challenge of making that entire journey greener and a whole lot more sustainable.
Okay, let's dive right in by looking at the single biggest and, often totally invisible source of a company's environmental footprint. It's a pretty massive question, and yeah, it needs a massive answer.
So, the main character in this whole story is something called Scope 3 emissions. The best way to think about it is like this. If a company's own factories are its immediate family, Scope 3 is the entire extended family. We're talking about all the indirect emissions from suppliers, shipping, and even from you using the product at home.
And here's why this is such a BFD. For a lot of big companies, these indirect, Scope 3 emissions make up nearly 3/4 of their entire carbon footprint. It's the huge, hidden part of the iceberg that you don't see.
Now, you might be thinking, how on earth does anyone tackle a problem that huge? It seems almost impossible, right? Well, it turns out it's not. Some of the world's biggest players are already paving the way, and they're basically creating a blueprint for how to get it done.
So the big question is, how does a global giant like Walmart, with thousands upon thousands of suppliers all over the world, even begin to get a handle on this? Let's take a look inside their playbook.
Well, it all starts with a really clear, structured game plan. The research shows they have this two-pronged approach. On one hand, they do deep data analysis on what their suppliers report, and on the other, they've built their own set of practical, hands-on tools to help out.
A huge part of their strategy is just asking their suppliers the right questions. They use these key performance indicators, or KPIs, to zero in on the biggest hotspots. Things like how much fertilizer is being used, or what the greenhouse gas emissions are on the farms themselves. And here's the cool part. They don't just ask the questions, they actually provide the tools to help find the answers. They have this massive initiative called Project Gigaton, where they give suppliers calculators to measure and report their progress. And the goal, it's just mind-blowing. They want to cut 1 billion metric tons of emissions. And they are absolutely leaning into some seriously cutting-edge tech. For instance, using blockchain, they've created some incredible transparency. Get this, they can now trace a shipment of mangoes from a farm all the way to the store in just 2.2 seconds. That same process used to take 7 days. Just wow. Okay, so tools and tech are awesome, right? But they're only one piece of the puzzle. You can have the best playbook in the world, but if you don't have the right players on the field, it's pretty much useless. And that brings us to the absolutely crucial human element, leadership.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The research shows it's not about finding one perfect type of leader. You actually need two. You need transactional leaders to provide the clear structure, set the goals, and monitor performance, but you also need transformational leaders to inspire that big picture vision and get everyone fired up to innovate. And that's the real key. It's the transformational leaders who create the culture. They build this sense of shared purpose, where every single employee feels a personal responsibility for hitting these big sustainability goals. It's not just some order coming down from the top.
But that brings up a huge question, doesn't it? I mean, it's one thing to inspire thousands of people, but how do you actually empower them to act? How do you give them the information and the tools they need to make a real difference?
Well, the answer comes back to technology. You have to build a digital backbone for the whole operation. Think of it like a central nervous system that connects every single part of the supply chain with real-time info.
And this is where we get into something called the Industrial Internet of Things, or IIoT for short. It's basically a network of interconnected smart devices and sensors that are all constantly feeding data back into one main system.
So yeah, really think of the IoT as the brain and nervous system for the entire supply chain. It's the tech that makes everything possible, from predicting when a machine needs maintenance to tracking a product in real time anywhere on the planet.
And when you build this kind of tech on shared international standards that everyone can use, the results are powerful. One big study found it increased system uptime, the amount of time everything is actually running smoothly, by over 6%.
And at the very same time, it drove down operational costs by almost 5%. That's a perfect example of how efficiency and sustainability can go hand in hand.
And maybe most importantly, it boosted what's called interoperability, which is just a fancy word for the ability of different systems to talk to each other, by up to 50%.
Now, this is absolutely crucial because it breaks down the data silos between companies and creates real transparency across the whole network.
All right, so let's zoom out and pull all these threads together. The strategy, the people, the tech, and see what the big picture really looks like.
So here's the bottom line. Creating a truly sustainable supply chain isn't about finding one single magic bullet. It requires these three pillars, what we're calling the sustainability triangle. You need a clear strategy for the what, inspiring leadership for the who and the why, and powerful technology for the how.
Ultimately, what this all shows is that making our world more sustainable is a team sport. It's about connecting global partners with a shared vision and giving them the tools to make it happen. And it proves, without a doubt, that what's good for the planet can also be very, very good for business. So I'll leave you with this thought. If the products you buy could talk, what story would their supply chain tell?